Hello fellow CNC nuts, and welcome back to part 2 of upgrading my CNC machine. Now if you watched last week's episode, you'll remember that I removed the XZ carriage on my machine, and then I had to remove the Y-axis carriages as well so that I could paint the metal parts on it. I've now reassembled the carriages, and on this one I've added in this attachment plate which is going to be used to reattach the X-axis. Here's the new attachment plate, and here's the old. You can see this one is significantly heavier duty than the old one, and that's because the new X-axis beam is significantly heavier than the old one. So I'm going to show you how I drilled all the holes in this plate here, and while you're watching that, I'm going to attach it to that carriage over there. Well, realistically, there's nothing spectacular about how I made the attachment plate for the X-axis. It was simply a matter of marking carefully on the plate exactly where the holes had to go, center punching them, and then just drilling them on the drill press. So the next thing I need to do is I need to add these 6mm bolts with T-nuts into the holes on my X-axis fixing plate here, and these will allow it to just go straight into the channel, and when I rotate it 90 degrees they'll lock in place and hold the X-axis in place for me. That means I don't need to slide the rail in from the side, which would be a right pain. It should make the installation a lot easier. And now it's time for the big reveal, the new X-axis rail I'll be attaching to my machine. So as you can see, I've chosen to go with linear bearings on my X-axis this time rather than the V bearings. And I've machined up this plate here, drilled all the holes in it to attach to these bearings here to mount my Z-axis. Now the X-axis rail with its bearings weighs 17 kilograms, and that's actually only 5 kilograms heavier than my old X-axis. And this one should be a lot sturdier because the old one, the extrusion measured 90 by 45 millimeters. This one measures 80 by 160, so it's significantly larger. So doing the holes in this 12mm steel plate was relatively simple. I started by attaching it to the CNC machine and spotting all the holes in the plate. That sort of cut down on a lot of the guesswork as to where everything had to go. Next I went through with a 3mm drill and I drilled through the entire plate at each hole that I'd spotted. That gave me the pilot hole for all future drilling. Then I went through and I drilled these holes here. These are the larger ones, and they're for the head of these screws to go into. I've chosen to use 12mm button head screws for this particular job. Finally, I went through all the holes and drilled all the way through with a 6mm drill. Now this bottom rail is not on here tight. The top rail's in place, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this carriage here to make sure that my rails are parallel. So I'm going to start by just tightening up the first one here, and I'll just, as I go past them, I'll just nip them up slightly, and we'll see what it looks like once we get to the end. Now here's a wee tip for you. Just because the holes in your rails are 6mm in diameter doesn't mean they will take a 6mm cap screw. In actual fact, what you'll find is the head of these here will not go into the enlarged hole in here. These rails here, at least my ones, required 5mm cap screws, and of course I went and ordered a whole heap of 6mm T-nuts. That meant I had to turn around and order another 100 5mm T-nuts, and more importantly I had to wait for them to be delivered because I was getting them from overseas along with my bolts as well. So measure once, measure twice, measure 3 times, and then order the right parts you need for your project. Okay, continuing on. I've now removed my X carriage from my rails here in anticipation of connecting the X rail to the Y carriages. Now it's incredibly important when you're sliding your carriages off linear rails of this type here that you reinsert these little plastic pieces that came with the bearings as you'd remove them from the rails. Otherwise, all those little ball bearings are going to fall out and... oh crap. Now because I'm working here on my own, what I've done is I've set up these pieces of wood here which are at the correct height so that this can sit on it and then slide in place. I've set these T-nuts up so they're horizontal, so hopefully they'll match the grooves in the rails here. And if I'm unbelievably lucky, it'll just push in place and that'll be it. Then all I need to do is turn a couple of these here and it'll lock it for me. Right, well let's give it a try and see if it works. Well, I've got to say, I'm really impressed with how easy it was to put this together. It could have turned out a lot worse. I've got a really nice rolling axis now. And next I'm going to add this. This is the rack off the rack and pinion drive from the old machine. Now, I've made one modification to it, and that is I've added this 3mm piece of aluminium strip. And the purpose of that is to raise the rack up 3mm so I can get a better engagement on the pinion teeth. Other than that, everything should be good. All I have to do is just turn these T-nuts so they can drop straight in to the slot here, like so. And tighten up these screws. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it and will join me for the next part when we'll be assembling the Z-axis and mounting it on the machine here. All that remains me to do is to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring that bell so you get notifications of all new episodes. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.